Welcome to the TowerCast Podcast, the towering podcast of the towering filmmaker. I am your current host, Michael Della, the director of the TowerCast Network, wanting to welcome you all to season 3. We made it, guys. We may have taken a little break for a little while, but we've regrouped. We have some new and exciting stuff to share with you that you've probably heard a little bit about from our Facebook Live event or any of the little sprinkles that we've left around. We want season 3 to open up with helping you all, answering your questions, showing you the way of getting started from making your film and talking about scripting and writing, finding your story, all the way to the end of finally post-production, editing, and maybe even getting it submitted out to film festivals. We want to use this season to help everybody just kind of get inspired back into the filmmaking groove. We're all hoping to really get back out there now that the pandemic's kind of coming in for a close. So yeah, this is going to be kicking off our, I guess, kind of, what would you say, how to be a filmmaker crowd interaction series. So yeah, this should be exciting. The first part of season 3, we're still going to keep our guests, by the way. We're just going to be trying out some new things here and there. But the first part of season 3, we're going to be talking about pre-production, everything from writing your story, planning out your script, finding locations, finding actors. If you have any of those questions, we're going to try our best to answer it, and we're going to try our best to just help out the community so that way we can all get back out there once things start to calm down. That's a quick introduction, but let's go and talk about who's in the room. We have our co-host, assistant, man extraordinaire. Actually, no, he's a great writer, director. We have Carlos M. De La Torre. Please say hi.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Howdy, howdy. And also, we have a known writer, a known actor extraordinaire. We have John Eric Castro joining us today.
What's going on, fellas?
Wow, look at him. We also have the great producer, editor, man extraordinaire. We have Austin Young.
Howdy.
Howdy, y'all.
That was the firmest howdy I've heard in a while. Thank you, Austin.
Texas howdy right there.
Yeah, guys. I mean, I hope you all are excited to try out this new kind of answering directly the filmmaking questions of, how do you actually go about making a film? I think for a lot of us, we already kind of know the mantra. We know what we want to do. We know how to get started, and we're all kind of at different points, but we really want to use season 3 as a way to kind of break down from the first steps of coming up with your story and idea, which we're going to talk about today, and go all the way to the end of finally finishing up your film and, sending it out there. And while we go through this journey, we're also going to be hopefully getting into producing our own films, hopefully soon towards the end of the year. And that'll probably be when we start talking about more of the production aspects of making a film. But we want to use this part to be the pre-production. So audience, feel free to follow along and kind of start making your own stories. But yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Guys, how do you feel? How is it, this new chapter of hopefully getting back into filming, getting back into actually producing films again? I know we've all been on a big break.
I think for most of those who haven't heard, a break to us means we probably had a week off, if that, from the TowerCast podcast, among the other meetings that we have. But for you guys, you're probably hearing this oh, this is a new thing. We just found it very fitting. That seems like we can finally say that we see a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of getting back into production, and what perfect time to kind of get people ready for that. There's a lot of people I've noticed in the El Paso community, a lot of people kind of branching out that limb a little more. They're kind of saying oh, well, if we're not doing anything, I'm going to write my own script that I've been wanting to write for years or whatever. A lot of that has been springing up a lot more. We've been seeing a lot of GoFundMes, a lot of Indiegogos, a lot of people trying to raise money for their first films even. So we've done this quite a bit in the past almost 5 years. And I think it's safe to say that we've gained a little bit of experience here and there that we could impart.
Yeah, definitely.
On every account. So definitely that's kind of what I would have to offer.
And I mean, when we started this podcast, it was to help people understand the filmmaking process of first off, how did we make our short films? And then talking to other people who have become successful in their own right. We've been fortunate enough to get guests, and we're still going to be getting guests and getting their opinions. But we want to kind of instead of you having to piece together all the little bits of how to make your own film, we want to use this as an experience to directly. Like, how did we start? How should you start? And then how are you going to end? And today, in talking about writing, I think, Castro, you're already starting to get the writing bug, right?
Yeah, I mean, me as an actor, I'm barely stepping into the world of writing, and I'm glad that I have you guys. I'm just curious how you guys start. That's what I'm really trying to get into right now.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how a lot of people are. I know that, like, whenever you look up any advice on making films, it seems like the first advice anybody gives to you is just, don't worry about what anybody says. Just go out there and start making films, and that's how you're going to learn. But I mean, yeah, like, the story is that part that we all start at. It's the part that you need to, as an individual, find in yourself, learn how to construct a well-made story, just so that way you can have. I
wish we had something like this. I kind of wish we had something like this when we started writing and producing our own films, because it's easy. A lot of our filmmaker heroes kind of say, like, well, all you got to do is pick up a camera and go. And though that sounds easy enough, it's good enough to get you started, to get you inspired, to get you proactive in the community. But it's smart to kind of plan yourself out a little bit. It's going to help you out a little more, I think.
Yeah, it's complicated, because I think.
What do you mean by plan out? Like, you know, they tell them to pick up a camera. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think
somebody that doesn't
just
know,
kind of as a full scope, you know, when it comes to making a movie, I'll kind of intro that a little bit early, where we have the different areas of pre-production, production, and post-production. And then even in pre-production alone, we start with planning out our story. We start with finding our story. We start with hashing out an outline, maybe a script already. And then we go into choosing our resources and our cast and our crew. So there's a lot to kind of explore. In this particular episode, we'll be exploring just finding your story. It's probably
the fundamental
most important
first part of everything. Yeah,
it's honestly probably the most important step when it comes to writing. I'd rather spend more time finding what story I want to tell and how I want to tell it before I put pen to paper. You know,
see, and that's what I wanted to ask. Like, I don't understand finding your story. To me, the way I've been starting to write is, I'm always thinking of the ending.
Oh.
Like, I don't know how you guys could start somewhere else. Like,
well, here's what I see. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough to take some classes over here, like, you know, our film school at UTEP. And the biggest thing they say is that there's a bunch of ways you can find your story. For one, if you don't feel like you're a storyteller, I mean, finding your story could be as simple as maybe finding other stories that are out online and trying to adapt those, so that way you can practice in being a filmmaker. Yeah. But also, finding your story can be your own personal experiences and things that you feel like have a lot of weight to them, things you can share. It could be
something that's interesting, that, like, you're talking about kind of the UTEP experience that I went through, that I know that a lot of teachers, professors are doing a lot more. Back when I was in school, back when Castro and I were in school, we didn't have a ton of teachers like show us what a good script meant. Like I've said time and time again on this podcast, that the program was really focused on, let's get you a job in news. Yeah. So we didn't really have the narrative side of things to kind of shape things out. However, we did have one professor, Marty Martin.
Oh yeah.
Who didn't even show us good scripts per se. He showed us good films. Yeah. And he showed us why these scripts are good. He showed us Academy Award-winning short films.
Short films, yeah.
To kind of kick things off for us. The Apartment was definitely one of them. Tango Argentini, which is a phenomenal film too that I really liked in that class. And they're just good stories. And it kind of inspires you, like, all right, as a writer, how am I going to tell something like that? But nevertheless, we got to kind of push it back to if you're a writer, right? We're specifically talking more to kind of the writer director's camp to a certain degree.
I feel like there's the writer director camp, which, you know, for a lot of people, it's very tantalizing. It's very exciting to be in the writer director, you know, seat, you know, being the person who makes the story, controls the story, and throws it out there. But even like me, working towards cinematography, or other people working towards editing, in a way, you have to kind of know, whatever filmmaker you are, you have to understand story and how to make a story and the processes of making a story. So that way, you yourself can either make the story yourself in practice, or
that's
like
what
you
I was
can
getting at.
yeah.
Like, if you want to be a cinematographer, you want to go into gaffing or lighting, or you want to go into into any aspect of filmmaking, sound, anything, you have to. I'm gonna put this at its basic level. You have to know what a script looks like.
Yeah.
You're gonna be handed a script in the process of making all of this, so you have to know what it looks like, and more so, like, you're gonna have to help this individual, be it the director, the producer, help tell this story. And if you're not on the same page as them, you're going to be clashing on set, and that's kind of what you want to avoid. So I get what you're saying, Delao, but I think obviously with more of a focus on writers, but
for sure,
if you're still getting started in filmmaking, it's important for you to know kind of how writers go about this process, so that when they finally hand you a script, number one, everything they've gone through to get the story told on paper. Number two, you might share a vision with them that's going to help them fulfill this on the screen, from script to screen. And number three, you're gonna appreciate the storytelling aspect a little more, because now you can read a script and say, oh, well, you know what, maybe that transition is going to be tricky to shoot. It's going to be tricky for sound. It's going to be tricky for, where you can start kind of helping the writer, producer, director say, hey, I got this note. We're going to be shooting in this noisy environment. The boom's not going to hold there. Maybe we use labs because there's a lot going on. Or maybe we shoot dry for wet in this particular scene because the camera's going to help you do that, whatever. So it just, I think you need to know kind of all of the aspects, including format, including structure, just so you can kind of have an idea all around in the story.
It seems overwhelming though. Like, all that seems overwhelming, from just like grab a camera and do something. Okay. To throwing all that on him.
It's because
I just want to know how. Go for it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say the reason I included and say that it's important to know for like any aspect you want to do in filmmaking is because, if you go to film school, it's one of those things they include no matter what you're trying to hone in on. They want to teach you the editing, they want to teach you the writing, they want to teach you the camera.
It's tough. Yeah. I just got a message literally right now while I was recording from Ricky, one of our execs at Tower, who we've been waiting for him to finish his script for months. And he just sent the script or the text, and it says, I finished my script, April Fools. Because it's tough, man. It's tough to be waiting around. But the fact of the matter is, look, I'm going to be frank about this process, because I wish somebody would have told me this. Yes, it's easy enough to pick up a camera and go shoot and go kind of develop the story as you're going, or just say, oh, I got a story in my head. I'm not going to put it on page. The fact of the matter is, unless you're doing this for fun, that's how the industry works. You have to go through the process of things. It's overwhelming. It definitely is. But if you don't trust me when I say, when you're dealing with network execs, when you're dealing with stream services, if they find as much as a wrong format, as much as a typo on your script, they won't even open the page, or they won't even talk to you. So it's important to kind of be faced with all the overwhelming aspects as a storyteller if you're looking to kind of be serious about this as a career. If you're starting to fall in love with storytelling, like, that's where we're at, the first step. If you're falling in love with, like, could I possibly be a writer? Could I possibly go into films? That step's a little more liberal in its nature. It's a little more liberating to kind of, well, I got this camera, I got this thing, I got this, that. What can I write with this? Robert Rodriguez actually is a very good example of taking count of what you have available to you. To tailor a script. And maybe sometimes that's the first step. Rodriguez likes to say that, okay, I have a camera, I have a turtle, I have this location, I have a guitar. What kind of story can I tell with these items at my disposal, right? I personally don't work like that.
That's what I'm saying. That's less overwhelming. Just to tell them, what do you have? And go from there. Instead of, but you need, you need the grip.
I think, well, like, one of the best things, like you were even saying, and he talks about in Rebel Without a Crew, it's like one thing you could do for yourself is look at all the things you do have available, even if that kind of goes down to like a phone camera, your house, and your pet, just to kind of break it down to like simple things, and then challenging yourself to make a story out of that,
And by the way, it worked for it's how Kevin Smith was inspired to do his film too when he did Clerks. Yeah. He literally read an article in the paper of Rodriguez saying, well, I had this available to me, and this is how I made a mariachi. And he said, well, what do I have? I have a convenience store. Perfect. That's where I'm going to make my film. He was inspired that way too. So I get how it works. I guess I'm afraid to key in on just that because I don't want creatives to think that sometimes.
Remember, they don't know anything.
No, I understand, but I don't want. That's what I mean. Like that's what I kind of want to communicate is I don't want you guys to think that the confines of resources are everything you have to be able to tell your story. If you have a world building script to kind of open up your don't limit yourself.
Right. I think we also got to bring into the factor of levels, and I think you're kind of seeing that a little bit. That we're all at different levels. There's people like I'd say me and Castro that we're starting to dive into storytelling. We're diving in. We want to write more because we see the kind of magic in that, and we would love to kind of see that actualized. Then there's people like that are just starting out in storytelling, and then people like you that. It's like you understand the fundamentals in storytelling enough so that you can break the rules and you can follow the rules when you see fit. But then also on top of that, it's like now I'm trying to see my story's marketability and I'm trying to see it where it can go next. Right. If you look at that, this spectrum, I think there's a great conversation to be had for all kind of stages you're at because there's all ways that we can develop.
No, I agree. Don't get me wrong here. I think that levels are definitely you're definitely gonna build those muscles and work them out enough to where you get to a point where you could say, well, I wrote my 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever feature. Now that I've practiced enough, maybe now it's time to kind of start marketing this a little bit. But going back to kind of the first stages, my whole thing for any writer, for any creative, the first thing I could kind of impart from my personal experience. And you hear it all the time, but trust me, it's so essential. Write what you know. Yeah. You have to write what you know, at least to kick you off. There's nobody that could tell that particular story better than you. My first, I'll put an example. My first short film was called Sun City Lights. And Castro has actually played a supporting role in that. He's been with us since that, literally the first short film. Sun City Lights was about a guy, a musician, a guitarist, who just graduated college, who was thinking of going into teaching because that's what you do. You don't really, you get a degree in music and you go teach, and that's kind of what happens, right? I was very heavily into music in those times. I was very heavy into playing the guitar and being in bands, and I knew that story. I knew that voice, and I knew I wanted to tell a story in that regard. This particular character had a friend that moved to the Austin blues scene and was calling him up. That's who Castro played. And was like, hey, man, you got to get out of here. We need a guitarist like you, la, la, la. So I knew that voice. I knew that story to a certain degree. And even that project is ambitious, by the way. Even that, like...
But see, how did you start that? Did you start... My bad. How did you start writing those? Did you start with the characters or did you start writing like the premise?
Think, honestly, I didn't have any direction in what softwares to use and what anything like that, right? So I think I just started writing it down like in a Word file, like just kind of ideas, almost like a stage play is written, like just, this is the idea, these are the characters, and then character says this character says that, this character says this, and I kind of wrote it in that format.
I think also kind of like what you were saying, Castro, just if you, like you said, the ending, like you might have an idea in your head and it might seem exciting. And sometimes the idea might just be the ending. And like Carlos was saying, just writing that down is enough where then later on, if you return back to it, it's okay to piece together and start off and say, okay, let's start fleshing this out. And then
there's different forms. There's different forms of what we know as outlining, right? Outlining could be just you literally pouring everything of your idea on a page so that you have it in front of you. You may, at that point, you're probably going to already have the ending of your story, like you're saying, Castro. Personally, I feel like I have like a glimpse in my experience. I have like a glimpse of what the ending is going to be, but I never like solidify it until I work my way there.
See, that's interesting. So how do you fall in love with your script if you don't even know the ending? Like you don't know what you want the audience to react to.
Okay. Let me ask you guys this. Let me answer your question with a question. When you're looking for a story to tell, what because I know my answer. What type of story, what do you look for in storytelling when you're receiving it in another film or when you're giving it in your own work? What do you want out of it?
See, with me, I hate to say this, as an actor, I'm always looking at the characters. I always start with the character.
Right. Like, that's super important.
Yeah, I'm saying, but I don't understand how you could start off with these two couple met.
Here's the
then figuring it out.
With me, character development is the most important thing when it comes to storytelling as a whole. Character development. That means I'm going to not just prove it in the script, but when I'm making the film, that's where I'm going to develop these characters, right? More than anything. My thing is, as silly, as weird, as maybe cliche as it sounds, when I'm looking to write a script, when I'm looking to finish a story, I'm looking for a feeling to capture. I'm looking
towards the end?
Towards the beginning, towards everything, towards the entire like script writing process. I'm looking to capture a feeling to communicate on the page so that whoever's reading this and whoever's going to help me make this film hopefully catches the same feeling that I'm trying to reciprocate or to reproduce or to produce, so that we're on the same page about, oh man, that felt like this, and it drew me into your characters. So it all starts with like the feeling, the tone, kind of the storytelling foundation for me is capturing a specific feeling depending on the script.
So
I feel like I've lost Scott.
I know. Another method that I had to use, I know when I was doing the whole screenwriting class recently.
I'll get back to you right now.
Okay. Well, so let's say you're the person who came up with an idea, right? Let's say if it's just the ending or it's the beginning or you start seeing a glimpse of something.
And I've been at this for a while and I still think that.
Okay.
That's why I'm trying to get to you guys. Like, how do you try to find it halfway or
Step one. Like, I think step one is you write it down so that way you can kind of hold on to it. Step two, at least what they showed us, was starting to develop like a log line or some kind of tagline that kind of isolates the film. Right. And in that, you start breaking down all the things that a good story needs. You start breaking down who are the characters, where are they, what's kind of the happening to them, what's the central conflict of the story that they need to overcome.
Right.
And then you want to talk about like what are their wants and what do they need, you know?
And you see, I
but
do that
that's
now,
coming off of
but that's the thing. I do that backwards now, but it's like you said, it's like you say, let's kind of give everybody the tools, the rules, so that you kind of have to follow in the beginning and then you're able to break them. I'm certainly happy to be at a place in my writing career that I can break those rules now.
Yeah.
But in good measure, like our screenwriting teacher was always about learn the structure, learn the rules. You're going to be able to break them later. Yeah, you're going to be able to break them later. And that's fine for you to break them and to mess with them. Let me just throw this out there.
Yeah.
One thing to study that's really, really cool, just to give you a foundation, just to give you a format of how to look, we all know how to storytell because we learned it in grade school. We learned a beginning, a middle, and end. We learned that the beginning starts down here, then you go to your climax, and then we come back down, and then we have our ending. We literally learned that in grade school. Right. A more developed version of that in screenwriting is called the hero's journey. And the hero's journey has been around since storytelling has begun, period. I mean, we even see it literally in books like the Bible, because it's a storytelling structure that helps communicate your message better. Everybody uses it. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Tarantino. You use a version of the hero's journey. Of course, Tarantino now knows how to break the rules. But here's what the hero's journey starts to be. A hero's journey, envision it like a circle. Literally, it's a circle.
It's like a circle.
So you envision the circle, right? We have our character, our protagonist, our hero, our anti-hero or antagonist. It depends who your character is, right?
We have
our main character, him or her, and they have a call to adventure. So we have them kind of in the spot where we see them for the first time. Usually that's a comfortable spot. Usually that's a spot that they're used to. Usually it's a dead end 9-to-5 job that they're comfortable in, that they know what they're doing. And then they get a call to adventure. Maybe that 9-to-5 job becomes exploring a bungee jumping career. I don't know. Then we get into the threshold. The threshold is like a doorway. That's kind of how screenwriters see it. The threshold is like the beginning of the transformation for this character. They separate the circle. If you picture it, if you draw a line in the middle or in the upper third of the circle, we envision it as like the known world, which is the top, which is where we start with, and then the unknown world. When it comes to like the conflict of your character, you have to put, in order for your character to have some type of development, and this is my biggest, like my thing when it comes to character development. When I see a film and I say, oh man, they could have done so much better in the writing. What I look out for is from point A to point B, Did my character grow? Did he maim? What did he do? What did he go through in order to have either a change or to stay the same? What does this character go through for there to be some type of development in his own persona, his or her persona? That's what the hero's journey is intended to do. We have challenges and temptations that kind of go into a transformation of our character. And then the next word is kind of that people look out for is what we call atonement, like an epiphany, like a moment of realization, a moment of true change. Then we go into the return. We go back to the known world as a changed person, as a changed individual, as a changed main character. And that's really what the hero's journey, again, it's a little much. And I know what you're thinking, Castro, but
it just seems too formulaic, but you have to go through it.
Yeah, but the hero's journey is just this small foundation for you to, if you need a more simplified version of that, we go back to your beginning, middle, and end. Where's your climax? Where's your downfall? And where do we end? That's really the most simplified version of it.
A nice thing about using these kind of formulaic templates, like there's the hero's journey. Recently, there's like the Dan Harmon's
the Harmon 8.
The Harmon 8s. Dan Harmon, creator of Community and Rick and Morty, most recently, has basically found this kind of formula for developing every one of his like stories.
It's genius, by the way. It's genius.
That basically talks about, introing the character, them having a want, then them trying to achieve it complicating things, and them needing to change their strategy so they can finally reach their resolution.
Right.
It's, but what I'm trying to get to is that the Harmon 8, the hero's journey, even the 3-act structure, and you can find 3-act structure with different beat points and all that. Using these templates, especially when you're trying to start getting into storytelling, will really help you because if let's say you just have that initial idea, you can say, well, like, let's say there's this character running and there's a cool explosion and he finally kills like the mob boss, you can say this scene, this awesome idea I have, we can plug it into this part in, let's say, the rest of the story structure. And then it's a matter of kind of filling in all the blanks, but it'll help you realize what needs to kind of be there when it comes to developing a story. You can't just say there's an awesome badass. You got to have to think like, well, he has to have something
it helps you stretch out your characters into certain gaps that the story is going to need to be filled. Yeah. It helps you make your character from 1-dimensional to 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. It really helps you develop your character, and it helps you develop your story. Look, in my personal opinion, there's 2 types of writers. And you'll come to discover this later. In my personal opinion, there's 2 types of writers. That doesn't mean they write 2 genres or they write 2 types of stories. There's 2 types of writers. There's plot-heavy writers and there's character-heavy writers. That's it. I think it all really boils down to, do you want to develop a plot to entertain your audience, or do you want to develop a character to tell a story with a little more depth? And in my opinion, this is just my opinion.
I'll take 2, Alex.
I think a plot-heavy thing is very popular, very entertaining, very mainstream. It exists everywhere. Definitely sells. But when you're talking about a character-driven script, quite frankly, I don't mean to sound pretentious. I don't mean to sound like, quite frankly, those are the stories that tend to make it to the Oscars. It's character-driven stories. And sometimes they're both, man. I mean, some people do a really good job at combining something.
And I know you get annoyed with me because I always ask you what the difference is, man.
What the difference is between, like,
yes, I
so
never
let me market it. Let me market it. I think a plot-driven story. I think let me try to modernize it so that we see something.
I was going to say, like, the Nolan Batman series would be very plot heavy, that there are all these different elements, and then the Joker, if you want to, would be the character.
Oh, I think wouldn't it be
because
Batman has too many.
No, what I'm saying is that in the Nolan Batman, if you look, there's a character, there's Batman, who basically his want is that he's trying to like keep Gotham safe, and he's trying to protect society, and there's always a villain that's there. And then in the course of him trying to stop the villain, there's bombs being put in different locations, there's characters that are moving around to try to like capture the villain, there's confusion that happens, there's things that are happening kind of like to multiple characters at multiple times, that it's a story that the environment's changing everywhere. It's not just one character.
It's this simple. When it's plot driven, the story is constantly looking for some element to push the plot forward. The plot of Batman is a vigilante that wants to stop the bad people in Gotham. That's the plot of Batman, right?
All right.
So
Joker?
in Nolan's Batman, though it does have a lot of character pieces,
Yeah.
I'm starting to understand.
more than anything, it's always looking for how is Batman going to have an interaction with the Joker. It's driving a plot forward. It's driving the bigger kind of picture. It's not as intimate. It's a bigger story, right?
I like that. It's not as intimate with just.
It's not as
character.
intimate, but a story like the law says. If we put the Joker as an example, it's all about his mental health, his conditions, his financial, economical status, his
wants change throughout the story.
Wants, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when I say that, sometimes they can be two both. I put this as an example.
Leaning towards one, I guess.
Back to the Future. Back to the Future is not only one of the best trilogies of all time, but when it comes to story, it's very plot driven, but it also focuses on a lot of characters that you get intertwined with, that you get involved with. The whole point of Back to the Future is, what if, literally when they were writing it, what would happen if I saw my parents my age? What would happen if I went back in time and bumped into my parents? That's the whole idea. That's the whole premise, right? Or at least to kick it off. So it's very popular, it's very mainstream, and it could sell, but you get intertwined with these characters and you start to feel for Marty and you start to feel for Doc, and they have character arcs that you start caring about. So these two worlds, they can most certainly be combined. They can be married successfully. They really can. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you read things, most writers tend to go in one direction or in the other. It's just easier. It's just easier that way.
What would you consider Guy Ritchie? Plot or character? His movie.
I think Guy Ritchie is more of a plot-driven.
Yeah.
Plot-driven.
Now I'm starting to understand it for sure. No, the dumb questions coming from an actor.
Somebody no. That's
important.
perfect. That's perfect. You're giving perspective to the people listening in. Like Guy Ritchie may be more of a plot-driven director or storyteller. He's also a writer, so obviously he's a plot-driven writer. Mm-hmm. But somebody like Wes Anderson, he's probably more of a character piece. So maybe, or I'll probably even throw somebody more like Spike Jonze into that conversation. When you compare her, to Rock and Roll Up per se, right? Yeah. Hers more intimate. It's about these two figures, this AI, this one individual, right? And again, some of those can be married very well.
That's where I was getting confused, because I was like, well, there's a lot of the other one, like the character.
I think maybe another way to kind of look at it is that in a plot-driven film, there's growth and change throughout like the environment and multiple people. Yeah. And with a character-heavy, all the conflict, everything that they go through, it's very inside. It's just within themselves. They're changing. Mostly
internal.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's mostly internal. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, there's definitely ways. So I would say analyze those little details a little bit. Analyze those details. Well, I have this idea about this character who's going to walk to the store to get his mother some groceries. Okay, that's how I start, cool. Yeah. I have my story of I want this character. Well, it's a very one-dimensional story. What about that story? How is this character going to grow or wane in his approach? What's going to entertain you? Look, I'm sorry. I take a very selfish approach when it comes to screenwriting. I think you need to impress yourself first. I think you need to be happy with yourself first. I don't think you need to write this with the intention to impress somebody else.
Yes.
I think you need to be really happy with your story by yourself in the room reading your script before you're able to all right, I think this is ready to share. I think you need to really stand there and say, okay, if my story is going to, why is the story making me happy? And if it's making me happy, why should it make other people happy? So you kind of have to analyze these moments, right? So
also,
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add in, I know that we kind of brushed past it, but using those act structures or any of those templates for writing a story, also, if you're just getting into storytelling, and it can be a very challenging world because it's not as easy as just saying there was a happy boy, then it became sad, and now he's happy again. Like it's not that easy. It's not on paper. It's not at all. I mean,
and I think it goes in steps, man. I think the 3-act structure is weirdly enough something that could paint a picture for you on how to tell a story, and then you forget about it for a while.
Yeah.
And then when you get back to it, you know how to mess with this 3-act structure. Trust me, like now when I'm writing scripts, you can ask Austin whenever he asks me, hey, how you doing with that feature? How you doing with the script? I say, oh, dude, I'm finishing up the 2nd act right now. And it's not like you pinpoint it, by the way. You just like, I'm about to wrap up the second act. I'm about to wrap up the second act.
I want
to know this.
Well, that's the thing.
Like,
also, like when these structures were made, it's because, and I think even Joseph Campbell kind of talks about it when he was developing the hero's journey.
Right.
It's not like this is just some random formula somebody came up with and said, oh, that's how you make stories. This is something that we all kind of do subconsciously, and we think about it in our life. I mean, in the way that we,
in its most simplistic, it's like iteration, 3-act structure. Your setup, your confrontation, and your resolution. Mm-hmm. That's your 3-act structure. That's your base. And by the way, the 3-act structure can play. I'm serious. I've seen it happen. Your 3-act structure can play in the 3-minute film, in a 1-minute film, in a 90-minute film, in a 2-hour film. It works in every capacity as long as you know what you want to tell within these 3 little iterations, right? So act 1 is your beginning, act 2 is your middle, act 3 is your end, act 1 is your setup, act 2 is your confrontation, and act 3 is your resolution. So that's kind of the simplest way you can kind of, if you want to start comparing, okay, I have my idea and I have kind of my story. If I put it up against the 3-act structure, what part of my story falls where?
Okay.
Right?
It's something that no matter how you plug in, how you're kind of manipulating, it's something that's, I think, built within all of us, that's how we understand story. We all know that, even when we talk about our day or what we're doing on our own, like, oh man, like, first I was just driving to the store, then I hit this car and it was a whole big thing about the insurance. I didn't know if I was going to make it, but then he says, don't worry. Like, I think we could take care of it. I called my, insurance people and now everything's fine. I was able to get home. I think I'm going to get a new car. And in that, it's that's weird kind of
3-act structure. Right,
that's your 3-act structure. That's
your
how
first act was I was driving to the store. The end of the first act is I crashed into a car. This beginning of the second act is I had to deal with the individual. We started exchanging insurance information. It was a big wreck. There was this, there was that. And then the individual told me, nah, we're good, man. Don't worry about it. That's the end of the second act.
Yeah.
The beginning of the third act is while I was on my way home and everything was okay. I didn't have to worry about the insurance. I didn't have to worry about that. I got home with my groceries in place.
Right.
Boom.
Right.
That's how we understand life. That's how we make sense of other people's lives, is that we all feel a story happening. We all understand a 3-act structure because it's within us,
See, and that's my problem, that I always start with the third one. I can't figure out how to start with the first 2. I know.
And you know why, Castro? I think because you're influenced. We're influenced by our favorite storytellers, right? And I think you love the M. Night Shyamalans, the Guy Ritchies, that when we get these kind of
you love the moment
and these moments, these final moments.
Talking my language. Yeah.
I think a little bit about like Now You See Me, right? Very plot driven, very heavily plot driven.
Right.
But that moment, that reveal at the end of Mark Ruffalo's character, that's what you're looking for as a storyteller, and that's admirable. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong.
In fact, it's kind of fun.
That's where I get
it's
stuck.
kind of fun. But it's kind of fun because you have your ending. But in order to have your ending, you have to know who this character is. You have to know how he ended up there, right?
Right. That's why I get stuck.
That's kind of your outline to a certain degree, right? So, I say the Mark Ruffalo character, it has to be more fun. And I wouldn't know personally. I've only written a couple scripts that are like that. There's Still Time being one of them. I knew what this ending was. I knew what this big reveal at the end was going to be.
Yeah, see, and that's what I love. But
But it's fun to get to that point. It's fun. Like, all right, how am I going to manipulate? What I like to call them is like, how am I going to throw these little Easter eggs that are going to blow the audience's mind when we get to this final ending?
Let me bring something up. Let me bring up something to all of you. We're talking about the structure and how that can be a very helpful kind of starting place.
Yeah.
But I think the next big thing to talk about when it comes to developing your script, and like especially like you have this idea in your mind and you're trying to find the way to fill in everything else. There's also understanding writing a character and how important that could be. A character can't just be something that you kind of pinpoint. You're like, the character did this. Mm-hmm. I mean, this character you're writing is a person. The person has wants, they have needs, they have things they're trying to satisfy. And sometimes understanding how that can be, I guess, kind of concluded or completed, like satisfying wants and needs to make that ending really satisfying.
Here's how a lot of people see screenwriting. Let me preface this, by the way, with saying that there's no wrong or wrong answer. This is the approaches that we've experienced. These are the approaches that may or may not work for you. explore all of the approaches. And what Delal's trying to kind of say, when it comes to screenwriting, a lot of screenwriters tend to call it like, a lot of screenwriters like to play God. That's the fun in being a screenwriter. You're playing God in your world. You're playing God. I don't personally take that approach, and it's not like a religious thing or anything like that. Instead of playing God, I try to heavily emphasize with the character I try to heavily empathize. I try to show empathy towards the character I'm trying to write. I'm trying to say, if I put myself in this character's shoes, what would I do? What would I feel? What would I go through? What would I experience? And that's how I develop my characters. Mm-hmm. But to a certain level, you have to play God. You have to pick up your character and place him in a location and say, well, what's going to happen in this location, right? So outlining it could be very helpful for certain people. And maybe that's where you were going for the level. I say that screenwriters like to play God because I know of screenwriters. I personally don't really do it this way. And maybe it's wrong. I don't know. I know screenwriters that will come with, binders of their character Bibles and what this character eats for breakfast in the morning and what this character wears for to go to sleep and what this character, I swear I've seen this, who he has in his contact list on his phone and who's on speed dial. I've seen this.
Is that necessary? Here's I'll talk about
admirable. It's not wrong. I'm not trying to make fun of it. It's admirable, but
I'll talk about like my personal experience. And again, to anybody listening, this is how what we've learned, what we think works for us, but by no means the absolute. I know that with the previous scripts that I was writing, and I've showed Carlos, when I was starting off at the beginning, because you need, at least the way they have it structured. When the way they have it structured, and what I was following was that whole hero's journey arc. Mm-hmm. The first thing you want to introduce is your character and their environment, and also what they want, because want kind of drives them towards the rest of the story. It's what pushes, I guess you could say, the plot along, and what kind of pushes your character to make a move.
And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I do want to add, don't be afraid to have either the 3-act model or the hero's journey in the back of your mind. When I started film school, I remember my brother, he made animated films, right? So he kind of studied a lot of this in his own right. And he would tell me, oh, dude, you have to know the hero's journey. You have to know the hero's journey. And there's another name for it. And he would talk to me. And as a screenwriter, I'd be like, nah, dude, that's bullshit. You don't want to, you're going to be limited and you have to follow a formula. And that's not necessarily the case. You have to learn the structure so that you can manipulate it later. Yeah. So don't be afraid as a storyteller that you're going to be limited, or you're going to be placed in a box as a storyteller by following a structure. They're just skeletons. I like perfectly what somebody said in the video I heard recently. A skeleton, it has to be there. And this is talking about structure and about outlining. A skeleton has to exist the same way it does in a body. Everybody knows that we have a skeleton and it takes form, but it's never revealed. The skeleton is never revealed in our bodies. Nobody ever sees our bones, right? That's the way it should be in storytelling. Nobody should ever see that you're using a structure, that you're using an outline, but it has to exist just to give it some structure. Right. And I take that to heart. Make it so that it exists, so that it holds up your body, but don't let anybody see the bones. Don't let anybody see the bones.
When you're just getting started, it's really complicated to try to by yourself come up with this really unique, interesting story. Yeah. And then trying to think, well, then what do they do next? And then what's this going to mean for the conflict? And having that skeleton can sometimes help you get past early writer's block. It can help you kind of get past
don't worry about being clever when you're starting out. Don't worry about being clever. Worry about telling a good story.
That's where we're pinpointing my problem.
That's what I'm saying. Don't worry about how am I going to cleverly. You'll learn that as you go. You'll learn how to kind of cleverly. Yeah.
The more you write, then you'll find out what are the twists you want to have. What are the ways you want to manipulate the structure? But if you're getting started and you're not even comfortable with, let's say, using screenwriting software and understanding that whole world, using something like this just to plan your story, outline it, I think will help you early on. We all know too many filmmakers who they're like, I know the best thing to do.
Dalao, you as a storyteller, were you starting out? Yeah. What are you looking for? Like you said, you have these scripts.
Good question.
What were you starting to kind of look out for when it comes to making
so we get into Delao's mind? How does that thing work?
Okay, first, I know that with my stories, I looked for kind of like that spark moment, which was the log line. Essentially, it was like I don't know what the story is going to be. I don't know how it begins or anything like that. But I had that log line of this is a character, this is where they live and what they do, this is what they want, and this is what's kind of standing in their way, and what they're going to learn at the end of it. And having that kind of just log line there, I mean, it was something that I could easily go back to and think, okay, this is what the character wants, this is what they need. And then you can sprinkle things like the obstacles. You can sprinkle things like how are they going to feel satisfied and all that. But to me, it started with character. At least that's the way I began. And that's what I was trying to get to right now, that once I kind of had that story spark, then I wanted to think about the main character and think, what does she truly want? Like, what does she truly need? Where is she at right now? And really fleshing that part out, because then that could kind of tell me, oh, wait, if let's say she's really nitpicky about being organized, well, then that's a character challenge that she could face later on. Or let's say if I say that her fundamental flaw is that, she's always late to things, that's something I can incorporate with the challenge to make the story interesting. And then by developing the character, I already could see what she was going to have to be faced with later on, which made my challenges, which then made what she needed to overcome to find my resolution. And that's why I started there. It's like before I even started writing it down, having a really solid developed character with wants, feelings, needs, hobbies, interests. Like you said, the character Bible, that helped me kind of get started. And I think for a lot of people, maybe if you're stuck and you're like, I know this awesome story and I know the bad guy and the good guy. Well, how well do you really know those characters where then when they interact, it's going to be powerful in the story. It's going to really help you feel something.
And that whole encompasses what I mean by write what you know. And that, again, it goes back and forth. It goes two ways, right? You have the character that you know so well that you know exactly what their next move is going to be. And again, you don't have to have a story Bible per se, but if that helps you get to know your character a little more, then that's fine. When I try to capture a moment in the script, I try to recall a moment when I felt that moment, almost like an actor, right? Like, well, what did I feel? What was my next step? What was my approach to this? That's what helps me. Like, okay, I know my character well enough to say, this is the next thing he would do. And by the way, my films, most of them, 99% of them are not biographical or autobiographical. But there are moments that I've experienced that I felt that I really want to communicate this way. I'll give you an example. I wrote a film called Edge of Desire. And Edge of Desire is about a guy who receives a phone call from an ex-girlfriend.
One of my favorites, man. I got to say, man. One of my favorites. It's one of those movies that you showcased in one of our classes. Yeah. And it really showed me the level of, not level, but the leap you took. I was really surprised with that film, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, look,
I'm not even in it.
That was one of the leaps that I felt like one of the leaps. No, and I appreciate it. You know, I do. That was one of the leaps I took to like, okay, if I want to make a story that's very personal and very intimate, and if you've seen any of my films, I'm very dialogue heavy. How is it gonna keep these people in the story is about a guy who gets a call in the middle of the night from an ex-girlfriend. They have a whole conversation, and if you're a guy or if you're a girl, you've had that conversation with your ex where you're up till 4, 5, 6 in the morning, just literally for hours, just talking, just bullshitting, just talking about everything. And it's a special moment. And then we get into like the nitty gritty of why they broke up. And that usually always comes up with an ex-girlfriend. And then the final moment of shock, as Castro would probably put it, is that he was never really talking to her. It was just a past anniversary where he remembered her and he was just imagining this whole conversation. And that's what the film is. So my initial thing was like, well, I want to capture this feeling. I want to revisit some of those moments where I shared, where I got a call from an ex and we just rekindled that spark. And that's what that was. It was like, well, if I wanted to tell this story, how did they rekindle it? What conversations did they have? And a lot of those, that's probably the most autobiographical film in the sense that I actually had those conversations almost verbatim in that film. And I knew to write him that way. And I knew what the next thing was coming. And it's almost like I was getting ahead of myself, right? Like I was telling myself like, shit, man, I know what comes after this. I know the blow that he gets to his gut at this point. So you get to that moment of like, man, like, you know your story and your characters well enough that you're like, shit, man, Oliver in this case, right? He's gonna cry, man. He's gonna get this big blow in his stomach at this moment. How am I gonna capture his emotion in this? It's so hard. It's so hard to capture emotion in script, because you either over explain or you under explain. And I know visual storytellers tend to under explain. Me, as a more dialogue heavy guy, I tend to over explain in the script. Actors, Gossip, you tell me, a lot of actors will get pissed at that because you're already telling them how to react. And other actors, like, they need that direction in the script. Like they need that clarity. So again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I wanted to give an example of like in Edge of Desire.
Yeah.
I had to really analyze a moment in my life where I felt a certain way, where I knew these characters because I was this character. I am this character. And it's just, how are you going to make two people talking on the phone interesting? And it might be interesting to you because you've lived it, right? But how are you going to make it interesting enough where other people are going to pay attention for 20 minutes?
Right.
So you just have to find these factors where people are going to connect to. People are going to, if they don't connect to it directly, they might sympathize with your character. They might empathize.
Yeah.
Or if you take it in the opposite direction, they might fucking hate your character. And that's going to entertain them the entire way. So it just depends. It just depends on what types of story you're trying to tell.
Oh, man. I think for anybody getting started, outlining in any facet can help you a lot. Whether you feel like I don't need it because my story's great and no one's ever heard it and I am God. I mean, whether you're that person or somebody who's like, I think it might be kind of fun to try this as a hobby, outlining will definitely get you to a really strong place.
What about that old school
unpopular
FBI pinpointing on the board?
That's fine too. I've seen people, Robert Rodriguez and his kids, they use note cards. They use note cards to kind of shift around scenes. They use note cards by scenes.
I want to try that.
They already visualize the scenes and they kind of pinpoint where these scenes are going to have to be. Unpopular opinion. Yeah. I don't use outlining unless it's for a feature.
I feel like it would help.
Script, if it's for a short.
For me.
If it's for a short, I can't. Like outlining, it's almost like, I know this is going to sound weird. It ruins the story for me. It makes me feel like I'm already at the end. Like I'm already,
No, I was gonna say that is definitely something that I think a lot of people, like once you start getting more into the whole screenwriting thing, I feel where you're at, because I know when you explained it to me, especially when I was talking about it, I could understand that. For me, starting out, this being like maybe the third or fourth like serious script I was kind of writing into, I used a software called Scrivener. It's not a sponsor, but one of the tools they have on there is making actual like little like note cards.
Oh yeah.
And then you can actually like make it and like connect it and all that kind of stuff. But what's cool about it is that, let's say if you look at that whole like 3-act story structure or the hero's journey, and you just write like a sentence, like when they say point of no return, you say, Susie gets in the car and drives off with Dan to go find the dad, like whatever that moment is. Yeah. Putting that on a note card and then just kind of having it like, okay, after that, then it's going to connect to this plot point. And it's like, confronting the fear. And it's like, the first challenge where it's like car breaks down, Yeah. By doing that whole little like FBI note card thing, I think what that does is that you're writing out all the points that are going to happen, and then when it comes to writing, it's just filling in that middle gap. So that's important. That can be helpful for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's helpful and it's important. I guess because I didn't have that direction, and it's a good thing you're saying all this a lot, because I didn't have that direction with screenwriting. So to me, screenwriting was like sitting at your desk and picking up where you left off and almost like being in a trance of like writing 6, 10, 8 pages in one sitting. Right. So that's been the most organic way for me to kind of develop a story. But when it's such a big story, even, my brain can't keep up with it. So I do have to outline and figure out which
a 90-minute long feature is just going to be impossible to try to.
It's going to be impossible for you to not outline almost. And by the way, we should also mention, when I started screenwriting, I used a software, literally a phone app. I don't even know if it still exists or not.
Celtic.
Called what was it called? In Scene or
it's still around, yeah.
In Film or something like that.
I think it's In Scene.
In Scene, right? Or something like that. If you're looking for something like that, there's plenty of free ones. Celtics or Celtics, however you pronounce it. Because I say Celtics, but other people have to say Celtics. Yeah. They have like free trials. They have free versions of it. I use Celtics till this day, with the caveat that I also use Scrivener because Alao got it for me. Scrivener is like a one-time pay. You pay one time and you get it for the rest of your life almost.
What is it?
If you get into if you're at the point that you're kind of really getting into screenwriting and you want to try to find a software that it's offline, you can use on your computer, just take it around with you, and it has a few more little storytelling tools. There's one called Scrivener. That one, it's originally was intended for writing like stage plays and novels. Yeah. But you can use it for screenwriting too. And I guess for those who don't know, the reason we use special softwares when it comes to screenwriting is because a screenplay has all these special types of formats, rules that you follow. That way, anybody who gets your script will understand, okay, this is when this character says this is a direction, this is where they're at, this is what time of day. And
by the way, we're sorry we're not diving into those specific details in full detail. The fact of the matter is that's a whole episode in and of itself. Yeah. And the intention of the podcast isn't to do that. It's not to walk you by the hand on how to write a script. It's to kind of help you structure story as a storyteller to a certain point. So just be aware that there is a script screenwriting format for both TV and film. Doesn't matter if it's a short or if it's a feature. There is a format that industry professionals follow. That you really do have to learn the rules of. And it's just as basic as writing stuff down, like interior, exterior of your scene, the location of your scene, day or night. And then you kick off into what action is kicking off, your character, your dialogue, your camera movement even. Yeah. So it just depends. That's what the structure works like.
And if you're getting just into that and you've never seen it before, or let's say if you start looking at scripts and you're kind of like, I don't understand why there's little bullets or little words put here and there. On the Rocket Jump Film School channel on YouTube, they have a wonderful video on screenwriting format. And that's a very basic video. Yeah. That if you look into, will kind of break up for you why all the formats are there, how you can start writing things in that format. And then also they have fun videos to kind of show you what that looks like on screen. So I'd recommend just look up screenwriting format if you're trying to get into any of those. That'll definitely kind of help you understand that at first. Yeah.
Yeah. So just mind that all of them, kind of like the law says, all of the screenwriting stuff, it was called Fade In. It was called Fade In. That one, I wrote my first script probably on my phone or on my iPad, because that's what that app is. It's a free app that kind of lets you do that. Fade In, Final Draft for Apple users, Celtics, Scrivener. Most of them will allow you actually to write offline, to save your work in an offline capacity.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah, which is big because you might be traveling and you want to write while you're on the plane for 3 hours or whatever.
And that's when the best ideas come to mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know I certainly did. Whenever I'd have long flights, I'd take my computer and I'd be writing on the flight. So just know that these exist.
What about the M&M stuff on the hand?
On the hand, yeah. Hey, it's a matter of preference. Here's a tip that I'd like to impart that I use when it comes to ideas. Yeah. Before I even touch pen and paper, obviously you get the idea, right? And you could be in the middle of work, or you can be in the middle of working out or whatever, right? I have an iPhone. I go to my notes section. And whenever I have an idea, I literally have a whole section.
Oh, dude, you showed me that, man. You showed me that one time in class.
Yeah, that's like my kind of approach with film ideas. Most of these I haven't even tackled, by the way. But they're just ideas to help you write it down so that when you're ready to kind of, I'm done with this screenplay, maybe I should go back and see.
By the way, it's so important to write it down. I got a little notebook that I just started writing like some story ideas in because, sometimes they come at you randomly. And I think we've all had that where we're just like walking and we're like, that sounds like a really fun idea. And if you don't write it down, it will leave you. And it will always happen.
By the way, you might revisit it and be like, nah. Or you might revisit it and be like, nah, it's been done already. It's been 2 years and somebody actually did it already.
But that's fine. That happens too. Honestly, write it down. I think, there's, like we said, there's different levels. And if you're starting out, or if you're like us that, are kind of going in, nudging a little closer towards We're leaning toward professional. Writing it down, trying to just write stories, whatever comes, keeping in practice. That's the best thing you can do. I think a lot of people.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think something a lot of people do is that they might get a cool story idea or something, but think like, there's a movie made on that, or like, this isn't cool enough yet, or like, oh man, like nobody's going to watch that. I think a very important step is that wherever you find story and wherever you think you might have enough ammunition in yourself to start writing, early on, just start building that up.
It definitely kicks off the imagination, man. Especially when you're having writer's block, it kicks off the imagination. Controversial, it might set off some people, so just be aware. The reason I got into kind of doing it's not like groundbreaking, earth-shattering idea where you write down your ideas, guys know, but Woody Allen, actually, I watched the documentary on him way back when, way before the controversy, by the way. And he was obviously one of my favorite storytellers and stuff. And he does that, but he writes them down on napkins, on papers, on little sticky notes, whatever he finds near him, he writes it down and he literally sticks it in the drawer at his house. And what's crazy about Woody Allen, from what he was saying in the documentary, is that like he was explaining to the documentarian, like, oh, this is how I do it. This is what happens. And he opens a drawer and he pulls one out and he's like, yeah, I remember that. And then, I remember that. And then he comes across one and he's like, oh, I can't tell you this one. I'm actually going to make this one. And then he kind of set to the side. I think he uses it like literally like a paper in the hat. Like, oh, what's my next one going to be? I'm going to stick my hand in the drawer and see which one I pull out. Literally, it might be a filmmaking challenge for people like that.
I think not only is it hard to come up with a story, but then it's also hard to stay motivated to continue being creative, because sometimes you'll have those sparks where you're just like, whoa, I got this idea that's super cool and I should do. And then you'll have long drought periods where you're like, I have nothing, and if you don't have anything backed up,
my screenwriting teacher actually communicated to me. I don't know if you remember this, Castro.
Which one?
Marty used to tell me, or he used to tell the class rather, writer's block doesn't exist. And he was bold enough to say that statement. Writer's block does not exist. What most writers do is they complete a work almost like a finish line instead of leaving themselves like. I remember you gave me that tip and it was super helpful. Giving you like a cliffhanger, giving yourself as the writer a cliffhanger. Like, okay, I have this scene. I know how this scene is going to end, but let me just finish this interaction instead of finishing the scene, so that when I come back, I'm picking up in the interaction I'm already familiar with, and it's already guiding my next step for the current scene.
In case that might not be as clear, I was writing a script recently. And I had Carlos kind of come in and he was helping me out. And he says that, don't finish the idea. If you know how the scene's going to end, don't finish the scene. Like leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room. That way, when you come back to it, you'll finish writing the scene, but then you'll have enough time to kind of think like, oh, and now it's going to continue into this thing. It's going to continue.
Yeah, the hardest part about writing, screenwriting, right? Or writing of any capacity, novel, anything, is to sit down and do it, right? That's the hardest part of like sitting down and coming up with the idea and figuring it out, right? This allows your brain to kind of kickstart its creative juices with something you're already familiar with, something you had already written, something you had already thought about, an idea you had already developed. So let me give you an example. Guy walks into a bar, starts talking to the bartender, they hit it off. And we know that the scene is going to end with him asking the girl for her number. We know that. We already know that as a writer. We've written it down in our outline. We know that's how the scene is going to end. Well, instead of me ending my writing session with the guy asking the girl for the number, maybe I end the conversation. I end this writing session at, hey, so where'd you go to school? Oh, well, I went to school at UTEP and I did this and I studied that. And I'm not gonna get to the point where I ask for the number. That way, when I come back, I already know, oh, that's right. I got to finish off him asking for a number. Then I can jump into my next scene. And it kickstart like the creative juices type of thing.
That's a little tricky, I think. Because to me, I feel like se me va a ir la idea. So I have to write
that. That's why you had already kind of developed the scene, right? Like you had already outlined it.
I know what you're saying.
Because what happens is that like in the outlining process, that there's Timmy and Sarah getting into a car and driving, and then the car's going to break down, and then they got to have to figure out a way to fix it and then continue the journey. If you finish writing it to the end of one scene, it's really hard to kind of think.
It's like starting a whole new script.
Yeah, it's starting a whole new story. Yeah, because then you're like,
start a new scene?
Okay, they fixed the car, but now what? And it sounds dumb, but yeah, you have those moments. Like,
it's very helpful. It was very helpful tip for me. I use it till this day. That's why I told Alao, try to kind of again, it may not work for you, but it's a tip that like allows you to. It almost allows you. It gives you your person, right? It gives you an ego boost. Like, okay, I know where I'm picking up. I don't have to make up a scene. I know where I'm at, you know.
For me personally, the script I was writing, at least in the scene, it was these two main characters that are basically going to be going through this kind of journey together in a relatively apocalyptic society.
See the finished product of that.
I actually wanted to talk to you about like co-writing. I need your help.
All right, cool. I'm down. But I begged you to let me co-write it with you.
I love that idea. But there's these two characters. They're going to be going on this journey together, but there's going to be a break. There's basically a break between them that they realize that what they each want, and in the time span that they have to do it, they can't complete each other's goals, you know, and they're kind of break apart. I knew that at the end of the scene, it was going to be that kind of climax of like, no, I'm going to go my way and you're going to go your way. And there's an emotional split between the characters. But then to write the next scene of like, well, where do each of them actually go? Like, where do each of them actually leave? Because on my outline, it's just like, it's the scene where the two characters, like Maria and John, are realize that their intentions are different and they split away. But it's open. The outline is open enough so I can write it in, and it's not locking me into anything. But then once you're writing
it doesn't feel so like. I know it's a huge accomplishment for a writer to get to a point where like, oh, I finished scene 3, cool, I'm good. But it's gonna set you up for like another hour, 2 hours of thinking before you start writing the next scene while you're sitting at your desk already. You know. Time is already so limited. It's like that. You kind of have.
I guess that's something that we didn't bring up, but yeah, if you're also outlining and trying to develop your story in full, so you understand it, make sure you're not writing plot points that are too detailed. Because if they're too detailed, you're going to be confused as far as like, well, they had to do this and they had to do that, so it's going to be really complicated to get them to do. If you're
writing, I mean, again, and if you know how to do that, all power to you, but. If you're writing Tenet and you're so focused on where the bomb is going to be at this particular moment so that you can develop the script to do this, then you're not going to have time to complete the story. You're going to be obsessed on where the bomb has to be at one certain moment. You're like, so it's tricky, but as a beginning screenwriter, don't do that to yourself.
Yeah.
Trust me. Don't
start writing in detail the script from that cool moment you had in your mind.
Yeah.
Because then it's going to be almost impossible. It's like trying to hit a bullet at the same target like twice.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm
seeing the look in your face. I'm seeing the look in your face. Here's the way that it was explained to me that I really do hold dear to my heart. The fact of the matter is, and I know writers I'm probably going to get messages on Facebook like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, trust me. Look, first of all, everybody in this room, everybody in my crew, everybody in my close friends when it comes to film, know that my biggest mantra when it comes to storytelling, be it writing, directing, editing, whatever, is that you have to be utterly and completely in love with your story. You're going to be living with the story for years. Literally, you're going to be living with it for years through the pre-production process, through making the film, through editing the film. You're going to be living with this film for years. So
unless you're David Lynch and you made Dune.
Pay attention to the hole, not the donut. Or pay attention to the donut, not the hole. No, but anyways, like really, that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you as a filmmaker. Love your story.
Yeah.
Let me put it to
You're going to be with it for a while.
This is why I think it's important, Castro, because to your point, if you take these baby steps to screenwriting, you're not going to forget those details, dude. You're not going to forget in the future writing session because you love your story so much that it impacted you so much that it's in you. Yeah. Should you write it down? Yes. Should you be smart and know that we're humans and we forget everything? Yes. But if there was a specific moment that was so important to you that you needed to put on paper, you're going to put it on paper. If you don't remember it, chances are it wasn't that important. So don't obsess over those moments because chances are you're either going to come up with the same thing or something better. So don't obsess with those moments and don't be afraid to like, no, if I don't write it down now, it's going to fucking go away and I'm going to lose my shit. No, like really, trust me. If you love your story enough, it's going to all come back to you. It's like falling in love for the first time, right? All these emotions, just when you think about that person, just come back to you in a way that's overwhelming. So don't worry about, no, if I don't sit and just chill, take your time, write your script, and don't obsess over the little details. I've had so many people get on my case because I'm the type of writer, I tend to direct my own films. So in my writing, I put a lot of camera direction because I know what I want.
Oh man, that's next level.
There's very few writers. Yeah, no, there's very few writers that do it. But
yeah, I kind of do that. My bad. I kind of do that with what is it called when you draw it?
Storyboards.
Oh yeah,
I kind of with you with that for sure.
Yeah, you definitely have to do it. But
also, if that helps you, for anybody starting out and trying to figure out what their story might feel like, if storyboarding helps you, it's definitely a way to go.
I know writers that storyboard before they write the script. I swear.
But
it exists.
If you're trying to get a crew to come together and you only have pictures, it's going to be difficult. Yeah. So
don't stop there. Just allow your storyboard to be your outline.
I think what the episode's trying to encapsulate, if there's anything that you feel might help you to boost it, be it outlining, be it storyboarding, be it just writing down the idea or the log line, trying to make a story is super hard, and that's why we're actually going to have a couple of episodes going into it. But
this is why this episode is so extensive. This is why we're not at the script writing process yet. We're just in configuring the idea and configuring maybe an outline and these tools to help you structure the story. Another thing I would say, when you're in this portion of it, where you're in the idea, forming the characters, outlining portion of your writing process, don't ask anybody. Yeah. Trust your instincts. Don't ask anybody until you finished a version of your story that you're comfortable and happy with. Okay. Because if you keep asking your friends, especially your filmmaking friends, I love, by the way, all my filmmaking friends, I love you guys. You're probably listening in. You guys are obviously in the room with me. Everybody has their own agenda, and they're going to tell the story the way they would, not the way you would. So allow yourself to be the storyteller before you're able to present your idea to friends and to collaborators. I know a lot of filmmakers, not just in El Paso, but all over the world, that I've encountered either through film festivals online or what have you, that they barely have a concept, and they're already sending you the concept to help them structure it.
Yeah, and please don't write your scripts with the intention of impressing people. I know we're kind of diving into different people, Castro, because we're trying to direct towards you, but then we're also trying to direct towards an intro audience. But yeah, please you're not trying to impress anybody. Don't try to be clever and cute with your story. I think, like you were saying, Carlos, be passionate about what you're doing. I think there's so many good screenwriters that can write awesome comedies, awesome rom-coms and stuff like that. But they're no, nobody wants that. I got to write the serious, gritty, Joker-esque film. And it's no.
Let me give you an example. Something that happened to me. I'll tell the story, and then we can kind of jump into maybe the final version.
Yeah, I got one question that maybe could lead it to.
Let me just give you an example of something that happened to me in class. Castro, I think you were there. I'm pretty sure you were there. I had
physically or mentally there.
Well, I'm both in my heart. No, hopefully. I had a script. In one of the screenwriting classes I took, the screenwriting professor made you write a script and come present it in class. Mm-hmm. And that's a very standard for screenwriting classes. You tend to get ideas from your peers, and you kind of give peer reviews. So I wrote a script, and it was kind of, again, controversial to a certain degree. It was about suicide, and it was about a character. The film is called, what is that movie called?
Oh, mine is, they're still, oh, fuck. Where's in the cliff? Damn it.
Yeah. What is it called?
Oh, yeah. Adalots?
Ineffable. No, the one that after.
Ineffable.
So many films.
Ineffable. Yeah. Ineffable is about a guy at the edge of a cliff who's thinking about ending his life, and he calls a suicide hotline because he got a card earlier that day or whatever. He calls the suicide hotline. He talks to the individual, and the individuals, both of them end up connecting through loss that they both had in their lives. One of them, she literally lost her fiance, and the main character, he lost his kind of girlfriend and discovered that she got married and had a kid, or is about to have a kid. So they're both experiencing this loss, and they both connect, and ultimately they kind of fall in love through this process. So I wrote the script, I brought it to class. This was before we were even conceiving to shoot it, I think. And I brought it to class, and everybody read it, and if you don't know my writing, I tend to write twice as long as the fucking assignment or whatever. So that was already a stint in class. But I had people tell me like, oh, I like this aspect, or I like that aspect. And I had one individual come to me and say out loud in the class, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Why doesn't he just fucking shoot himself, dude? He should just I swear, these are his words exactly. I'm almost like verbatim saying this.
Wow.
He should just fucking shoot himself. That's how you should end the film. You got to end the film with him fucking shooting himself. And everybody kind of stayed quiet because they're like, because as a writer, you start thinking like, oh shit, is he right? Should I have him shoot?
It creeps up on you, yeah. But yeah.
You know, not just me, but everybody in the class, right? And I remember our professor, Via, he stepped in. And by the way, at this point, Via and I hadn't really seen a lot of eye to eye because we're very different in our approaches to storytelling.
It's a big writer.
He stepped in and he said, why would you have him kill himself? Because that's how it needs to end, man. It's, you know, it's going to close out your story.
It's going to be powerful.
It's going to be powerful and impactful. And that's how movies are right now. And it's just dark. And then he says, okay, but he's setting this up as a love story where two people find each other in an unconventional circumstance. And you want to end that? And the guy just kind of stayed quiet. And he's like, no. You see, you're over here looking for what's going to impact the audience in a dark way. It's not about that. It's about the type of story you're telling and how you're trying to develop these characters and the kind of that emotion you're trying to go for. Right. And that made me feel comfortable as a writer. That made me feel secure. Like, okay, good. Like I'm following my instinct. I'm not listening to that guy. I'm not listening to our peers to a certain degree. I think a writer and a director should only show your work to people after you feel it's finished.
And to the right people.
Yeah.
And to the right people.
To the right people. Oh yeah, absolutely. Not just anybody, but to the right people.
Because like I know I can share my stuff with you and Castro, and I can share my stuff to like our tower team. Because I know you're gonna look at it like, okay, there's these parts that work really well, and I know what you're going for, and you understand me as a writer, so I can tell you what needs to improve and what needs to happen. But if I just share it to everybody who I know who writes scripts, they're gonna be like, no, this doesn't make sense, or no, he should just shoot
gone through this with
like,
you, and you guys won't let me lie. Castro, I've gone through it with you, with your latest script, the law with your latest script. I am very careful about saying, hey, don't take my advice, take my advice. It's up to you, number one. Number two, I'm going to communicate to you what I would do.
Right.
And what I think you should do for your story. There's two different versions, right? Like if I were directing this or if I were writing this is probably how I would approach it. But it seems like you're going in this direction. So maybe you should, lean into the skid for this particular moment. So I'm very careful about any screenwriter friend of mine or director, or whatever, to say, hey man, don't take my advice or do take it. It's up to you. But also, this is what I would do.
Because I've also like interacted with people where like you tell them that concept and they're like, no, I would hate myself for not going with my view.
Well, that's
not what it's about. It's just
I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but if you're in your early 20s, early 30s, barely getting into this, and you think you've mastered screenwriting because you've seen everything.
There's a lot of people like that.
No, if you think your story is so gold that this needs to be somewhere great because you came up with it in your early 20s, I'm sorry, but no, that you have not.
Can I tell you a story before you ask your final question? I had somebody recently, this impacted me. If you listen to our podcast, you know that Martin Scorsese is my hero. And Martin Scorsese is not much of a writer, by the way. He writes certain scripts. He kind of co-wrote Goodfellas and wrote like certain scripts or something. But for the most part, he's a director who goes with other writers. Yeah. I know that I'll watch it. Somebody told me, a friend of mine who's interacted with Scorsese, who's a film critic, by the way, and spent like 5 hours in Scorsese's office at one point because he's a film critic and he interviews people like this and shit. He told me, man, I was sitting with Marty, and then Thelma Schoonmaker, his longtime editor, his closest collaborator, walked into the room, and they kind of have their offices conjoined the way one day Austin and I are going to have our offices conjoined, editor, director. And he says that Thelma told him, it's funny. They were talking about The Departed. And if you don't know, The Departed was the only film Marty won for Best Directing. He's been nominated 20 times, but he's only won for The Departed as a director. And she says, it's funny, like Marty felt like he got validation.
Fake news.
Marty felt like he got validation from the industry until he got his Oscar. like until he got his Oscar, which was like 2006, 2007, whatever.
Your peers, yeah.
He had already made masterpieces. He'd already made Taxi Driver and Goodfellas and Casino and Last Temptation of Christ. No, not The Godfather. Wrong director. He'd already made masterpieces, and he didn't feel validated until he finally like got his Oscar. That has to tell you something that even the heroes, the masters of cinema, don't feel like they're there yet. Don't feel like they fucking know it all. Like that should humble us to like, man, if my hero didn't feel like he had made it until he got that godforsaken Oscar, imagine like us, man, like nobody, especially on the lower local level, none of us should feel like we've made it, man. It's toxic to think that way. It's toxic for yourself. It's so self-sabotaging because then you think that every script of yours is gold and you're never going to want to improve.
Like be passionate, be very passionate about whatever you're writing. Like, put your heart and soul into it.
Absolutely.
And feel in love with the script. But don't stop there and think that that's your best project of your entire life, because you're going to
be in love with your story. Don't be in love with yourself as a writer.
Yep.
Yeah. Because you're going to need to write this
with my latest script. Like I had Dalao read it with me and Austin read it with me and Gastos read it beforehand. And I remember thinking to these guys, like, cause I've had close collaborators of mine, thankfully, tell me like, dude, this is your best work. Like, I honestly mean that. You did this and you did that. And I kind of tell myself and I tell them like, I hope this is my worst work moving forward. Yeah. I hope the next thing is better than this. I hope this is my worst thing moving forward.
Because you feel like you did your best thing at 25 and then the rest of your life is just
not just that. Yeah. Not just the peaking aspect, but also if a studio exec tells me this is the worst thing you've done, then that helps me. Like, I either digress and like, well, what the fuck am I doing wrong? Like, or I say, okay, fair enough. It's my first big thing. I'll move on to the next thing and develop something better.
For sure.
And like, otherwise, man, this business will eat you alive if you depend on your script validation, the only meal ticket or validation for you. It's going to eat you alive, man. You should never stop being a creative. You should never stop trying to pursue being a better writer. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a good way to kind of give people advice on this front. If you're starting to be a writer, like Astro says, it can be entirely overwhelming. But surround yourself with the right people. Bounce ideas off to I remember Eric Sanchez, man. Eric Sanchez is a good writer. Honestly, I really do think he's a really good writer and a good director. And Sanchez comes to us like, hey, man, I got an idea for a script. I was bullshitting with my friends. We were getting drunk and I pitched it to them and we started talking about it. And that's how I got this idea. Sometimes those are the best moments for you to just bounce ideas off with your friends and just like, hey, that'd be a cool movie. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
Don't be so overwhelmed. It's about telling a story that you would want to see on the screen more than anything. That's it. Whether you think it's original or other people think it's unoriginal. I would like to see this on the big screen. That's it. That's the beginning and ending of you trying to kick off a story.
So Castro, did you have one final last question before we kind of transition into the end?
Well, what's the next episode about? Let me see if I can hold off.
Okay. The next episode. So this episode for everybody listening was about coming up with your story and I guess outlining and just really kind of like finding out what your story is going to be about. We're going to start talking about like the production process and all that, but we're sticking to story again for the next episode. It's going to be researching and actually writing and structuring. So it's going to be not only did you come up with your idea and it's a fun idea and you think it could go somewhere, but now what are the elements to keep in mind as far as like actually forming it into a screenplay? How do you know it's going to be a good screenplay? And then also how to research to make sure that each of the parts that you're writing into it are going to be solid. So that's what we're kind of going for.
There's no shame in that. And we'll get into that on the next episode. There's no shame in Googling, how do I write this scene particularly? Like, how do you write this format?
I have an anecdote that I'll bring up in the next one, kind of near to me, of a feature that I was writing and I felt really confident about and I really liked it and I liked where it was going. And then I talked to somebody and they say, that's not at all how the actual industry works. So like, I know what the story is, but to any writer who reads this, it's going to be unbelievable. And that was something where I felt like if I had known how to research and how to really develop that understanding, it wouldn't have only helped me as far as like juice for what to write next in the story, but then it would have been something that I know is believable and it's strong and it's sturdy and it's not weak at the foundation. So yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I think we can all dive into some of the stories that we've experienced. We're all writers, guys. Everybody, if you've written something, you're a writer. Identify yourself as a writer. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned from Rodriguez. Stop saying you're going to be a filmmaker. Do you make film? Then you're a filmmaker. Start calling yourself a filmmaker. That's it. I think he says something along the lines of like, put it on your fucking business card. You're a filmmaker. Identify yourself as that. And if you're a writer and you're starting to write and you're a writer, identify yourself as a writer. Give yourself that validation to yourself. I will say this, if you can, give us topics, man. Give us ideas. If you have questions. I'm going to get into that right now to kind of break everything down. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Castro, to the conversation before?
Man, it kind of seems like a big question for like towards the end of this episode. It's just one of those where it's another roadblock I get when I'm writing a script. It has to do with like the budget and the resources. Like Carlos knows with my new script, like having like a certain stops me, like having like, and I don't want to give out the idea, but
okay. I don't know if this helps or doesn't help. I remember that when I was talking to my early screenwriting professor, and he's like, "I want you to start writing your feature." One of the questions I asked, and it's with a lot of like naivete, I said, like, well, what if I have a story, but I don't think I could produce it, or I don't think I could produce it in the city, and I think I wouldn't have the budget. Like am I supposed to be writing something that I think I could make? And he says no, you're a storyteller. He says this script, even if it doesn't get produced, like even if right now is not the time to get it made, because being ready like as a story or being ready to be made and all that, it's different. But if it's a story you're passionate about and you're ready to kind of go into, write it with everything. Write it with all the technical explosions, all that, because
don't limit yourself. It's the worst self-sabotage you can have. And by the way, we're gonna have an episode on finding locations and finding resources. Yeah, that's right. So we're gonna have an episode on that. But just take this into consideration. I'm telling you because I'm having these conversations now with like studio execs, and their whole thing is like, I'm showing them 2 or 3 different scripts, and they're saying, "Look, this one is the one that we love, but we can't make it yet. Like, we can't make it yet. It's so big and so ambitious that you might have to stick it in the drawer until you can make this one and this one that are a little more simple to make." Yeah. For it's that type of situation. You got to prove yourself to a certain degree,
don't give up on the story. If you feel passionate about the story, write it with all the I guess kind of like explosions or imagine whatever you want. Yeah, really just allow yourself to be free, because
imagine if somebody told J.K. Rowling, "You're not going to be able to make Harry Potter." Like, no, write it as big and create the world you want to create.
Absolutely. But see, where I'm getting stuck is, since I'm not a big writer, how can I just put that in the drawer if that's the only big, what I'm saying? That's kind of hard. Like,
what happened? Because it's not necessarily about like sticking it in the drawer. It's about you finishing the story you're wanting to tell.
Yeah.
However you envision it.
Don't stop midway through. The idea is that, if you're really passionate about the story, finish the story with whatever elements, whatever scenes, whatever you think is going to make it feel whole and complete. Because if you're passionate about your story, it really does come out in the writing. It doesn't matter what the story's about or what the genre is. If you really are connecting with the characters, the events, the situations, and you're writing with passion, it'll connect with other people. But don't even if it can't get produced essentially because of resources, that doesn't mean that it's not a good story or it's something that
no. You might tell yourself like, well, let me write this. Let me finish this idea because I'm fertile in this ground. I'm fertile in this particular idea right now. I'm going to finish it because I don't want to lose that passion for it.
Right.
Once I finish this first draft, well, it depends. If you're a writer, dude, writers have the luxury of writing anything and everything they want for as long as they want. If you're a writer director, you have to kind of get to a point where you're like, well, can I also direct this? Can I produce this? Right. You have to get to a point, if you're a first time filmmaker, you do have to get to a point where you might have to write something that allows you to use the current resources you do have. But that doesn't mean you should not continue writing your passion project. No, absolutely not. You continue doing both. Yeah.
So if you don't mind me kind of bringing the episode to a summary and bringing on the next points. First biggest thing, if you're writing, put all of your ideas on pen and paper. That is going to help you so much. If you're not too sure what it's really like to write a story, feel free to look at any of the resources or ask filmmakers, ask us what you think, it takes to kind of write the story, and looking at story structures for screenwriting, things like the hero's journey, the 3-act structure, Dan Harmon's 8. Looking up any of those ideas will give you really good, solid platforms for writing your story, getting to the next step, and getting you ready to start putting ink on paper. If you're somebody who's not really a storyteller, or even if you are a storyteller, but you're trying to get kind of into like actually producing, feel free to make the story about what you have around you. If you only have your cell phone and your family and your house, and that's all you can write in right now, or all you can make a film in, feel free to make a short story or something that allows you to kind of experience that and start jumping into filmmaking. There are multiple ways to get started, multiple ways to get inspired, but keep looking out there. There are plenty of topics that can be explored. As long as you're passionate about your story and you're passionate about being a filmmaker, you can do it. I think we all feel that, and that's why we kind of did this episode, because it's a weird ground for a lot of people to get started on, but we really feel that, if you are passionate about something, you can actualize it, as long as, you're taking the right approaches and right steps. And hopefully this episode isn't a close on us talking about screenwriting. It's just more a nice part for anybody who's interested to get started on and think about. Exactly. And then what I'm going to bring up next is that, let's say if we talked about something that you would like to hear more about, if we did talk about something that you thought was kind of iffy, or if you feel like there's something that we didn't cover, if you know more than us and say you completely,
and you very well might. We're not. You
completely ignored Alibaba's rules for screenwriting, and we're like, yes, Alibaba. We're going to be starting a new segment. We're going to be starting a new segment again. This is the 3rd season. You should have figured this out by now. No, we're going to be starting a viewer mail segment where you can go on your phone, and if you download the Anchor app and find the TowerCast podcast, you can leave us a voice message that asks us any question you'd like. This can be questions about the pre-production process, the production process, the post-production. Or if you're wondering what we think as far as filmmakers, what we think about the industry, what do we think about filmmaking in general, what are our own personal challenges? If you'd like to know anything that relates to film, we would love to hear it. And the way we have it set up right now is that if you leave your voice message on the Anchor app, we're going to be able to play it while we record. So we're all hearing it for the first time, and we can all give our honest opinions and reactions. And if we truly feel like it's something that we can't cover, we will go and find any guest we can to help us elaborate on that, because we want to use the podcast as definitely a really nice ground to help people.
And by the way, if you feel like shy or something like that and you want to remain anonymous, just say that on the message. You can remain anonymous, or we don't even have to play it if you feel like you don't want us to. You can just ask the question. Don't feel like we're going to force you to come on the air or anything like that. Just
you can comment on any of the social media pages. We just want to connect with the community. We think that this is a great way to kind of help everybody get inspired towards filmmaking.
And you've, I'll make a note here too that I'll just say, if you've been following our podcast since the beginning, first of all, we thank you, because that's awesome and we appreciate it. The first season really did revolve around our approach to storytelling and filmmaking and what happened with us in the first 20 plus short films that we did. And then the second season revolved around talking to other local filmmakers and what their story, their journey has been. And that catapulted us into talking to bigger, badder filmmakers that we were shocked with. Though we are getting more guests, like Dalal said at the beginning of the episode. We have locked down actually a lot of amazing guests, which we can't tell you quite yet, but we're excited. We're scheduling them out. It's pretty awesome. You'll come to find out who it is. But in the meantime, we didn't want that to be the focus of the show. We want it to be very important that this filmmaking podcast is about filmmaking. We want to help people understand that it's not impossible. It's not. Hollywood isn't this
mythical thing
anymore. Yeah, I mean, it's not even about Hollywood. It's about storytelling, and there's so many broader aspects
of filmmaking.
Of filmmaking that exists that we feel every filmmaker should know. So communicate to us. That's the whole point of this podcast, is just
bring those questions in.
So thank you.
So
that's kind of it.
For anybody who would like to kind of keep asking us while we're going to be doing a good couple of episodes. If I'm not mistaken, right now we have lined up 5 different topics in pre-production that we're going to be talking about. The next one is going to be tackling outlining, or no, it's actually writing your script and researching. So not only did you come up with your idea, but how to make it better and how to really just make it strong. So that way, when we start getting into the further parts in pre-production and planning for filming your script, it's as strong as it can be. Then don't worry, even though this is all an experiment, us trying to help you guys and talk to the community about the film process. But if you've enjoyed our guest segments and having different people on, different perspectives, we just recently recorded a really awesome conversation with somebody special. We can't really talk about it yet.
I thought you were going to say it.
I know. But we're still having awesome conversations. We're still meeting filmmakers. We're trying to learn more about other people that we may not have talked about, different departments and all that. So please stay tuned for that.
Yes.
And by the way, we might on these segments, the whole point of this segment or this format of the show is that we're going to get back to filmmaking soon, sooner than we feel. And maybe we'll have an episode on set after wrap and just sit around and say, hey, now what did we do today? Well, we did this and it happened this way and then happened. That's the whole goal, is to kind of transition us back to that.
You're listening
and by the
to
way,
people.
I don't know if I announced this, but because we're ending the episode, I'm going to announce it now. I think I announced it previously, but I want to make a very solidified note of 2 things. I'll let you do the third one, Delao, because I know you're going to communicate that about who we just brought onto the team.
Yes.
But before you say that, Michael Delao and John Eric Castro, your fellow panelists here, are going to be running the TowerCast network for us. They're going to be in charge of this particular branch. Michael Delao is going to be your humble director of the TowerCast network, and John Eric Castro is going to be the assistant director of the TowerCast network. And they're going to be running this thing, man. They're going to be coming up with so many awesome ideas. It's not because I think I'm a badass or because Austin thinks he's a badass. It's because
we're getting ready to film.
Thankfully, in the blessed way, in the most humble, approachable way I can communicate this, we've gotten some really big opportunities with Tower, and we're developing a lot bigger projects. And we have to focus on developing these projects and give them our attention. Thankfully, we have these amazing guys who know what they're doing, who are passionate about this, and they're going to be able to transition us from the podcasting world back to the filming world. And while we're filming, they're going to be filming with us, by the way. They're just going to be in charge of these aspects of the podcasting network. So first of all, congratulations, guys. Like, this is a big deal. It's a big deal that you guys are the right fit to do this. And we've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah. So this podcast does burn into the ground. Now you have a face and a personality to blame.
Pressure, Delao, no pressure.
Right. No, but it's wonderful that we can kind of continue this. I mean, we didn't think we'd get as many people who were supportive and as, engaged with what we're trying to do. And we really appreciate everybody who's still listening and still giving us a try, because we would have had all these conversations if this wasn't recorded or not. Yeah. So we just want to continue having the conversations, but now this is an opportunity to include more people. So we're really excited. Another big person we brought on to the team. Drum roll, please. We brought on Mr. Drew Mayor Oakes, previous film commissioner of El Paso. Hopes to come back. I mean, can we say that?
He just communicated that.
All right.
He hopes to come back pretty soon. Once the pandemic kind of closes up, he'll be back and bigger and badder than ever. He's already told us some of the projects that they're getting ready to do.
The film scene in El Paso is not dead, and it's because of him. We can thank a lot to him. He is our executive producer on the podcast now. Yes, he deserves. We've talked with him multiple times, and he's offered so much help even before we gave him this title that, it was about time for us to kind of give him that recognition, because he's just so supportive of our podcast and everything we're trying to do and connecting. So so we're
Drew,
excited to have you on, Drew.
This, which I'm sure you are. Congratulations, welcome to the team.
Yes, thank you, Drew. With your help
to us.
Yeah, you're there. We're just excited to start this next chapter, and we're excited to share it with the community and, see what happens next. As always, if you have anything you would like to ask us, now you have a new way to ask us. Go download Anchor, ask us either ananously or with a voice recording.
Free to do.
Yeah. have fun with it. Even if you just want to leave like little messages saying hi, we want to include the community now in whatever way we can. We're going to be continuing this series, but like I said, guests are on the way. We have some scheduled in the very near future that we're super excited about. And I guess I'm going to be helping hosting now. Woo! Yeah, that wasn't needed, but forgive me, right? So but you're going to be seeing a lot more of us. It's going to be really fun having these topics and conversations with you. And I think this next season is just really dedicated towards connecting with the community in any way we can. And we're all ready to get back into filmmaking, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So you're going to be getting all the raw excitement, our process, what we're at, what we're doing along the way. And we're excited to have you. So thank you, everybody, for listening on every platform. Keep tuning in, keep writing your scripts, keep doing everything that you're doing to be a filmmaker, because you are a filmmaker. You have made it. And thank you for listening. Take care, everybody.